Yes. Here we go. Here we go. Another episode of the What? The Format Podcast. And I'm your host, Bruce Hope. Thanks for tuning in. So today we're in the midst of the NBA playoffs. We're getting down to the wire here, and we're going to talk some hoops. So you know if we're talking hoops, you know who's going to be with me. Yes, indeed. Official Format Podcast hoops analyst Andy Noel. We're going to have some good NBA talk for you. So we're going to get to that in just a couple minutes. But before you do, you know what it is. We got to knock out the particulars, so let's do that. First and foremost, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you're listening to me, you already know that you can find this podcast anywhere that you get your normal podcast. Google Podcast, Stitcher, Podbean, Overcast, Spotify, iTunes, whatever it is, okay? If you're listening on iTunes, do me a favor. And even if you're not, go on over there and give me that 5-star review. Please do, please do, please do. It helps us move up in the rankings and helps me keep putting the show out, okay? Please let's go ahead and give me those 5 stars. All right. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for that. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button in the lower right corner of your screen. I appreciate it. Also, click that bell so you can be notified when new content comes out. And if you enjoy the content, click the like button. All that helps and kind of lets me know where I stand with you. All right. You can definitely reach out to me anytime on social media. If you have Twitter, it's at Bruce F.A. Hope. That's at Bruce F.A. Hope. If you're on Instagram, it's at The Format Podcast, at The Format Podcast. If you want to email me, you can email me directly. The address is theformatpodcast at outlook.com, theformatpodcast at outlook.com. You can reach me through all those methods. Go ahead, drop a line. If you want to hear me discuss some, you can let me know. If you think I'm an idiot, let me know that. If you think the show's great, let me know that. I appreciate it all. Love the interaction, negative, positive, whatever it may be. All right. So I appreciate all that. And finally, you know what we do? Sit back, relax, and listen up to episode 99 of the format. Here we go, everybody, back again to join us to talk hoops. Of course, it's who else? It is the Format Podcast official hoops analyst, Andy Noel. Andy, it's been a while, man. What's up?
You doing, my brother? Good to see you,
Doing
as
all right,
always.
man. Absolutely. Hey, let's get to it, man. We got some good stuff to talk about. So, obviously, we are deep into the NBA playoffs. And so, with that, we're going to start with the playoffs and the final four remaining teams vying for a championship this season. And that, of course, in the Eastern Conference is Milwaukee and Atlanta. And in the Western Conference, Phoenix and LA. No, not the Lakers, the LA Clippers for the first time in their history. First off, Andy, just what are your thoughts about the four remaining teams? Just kind of give me a brief outlook on each team and kind of what you think of them.
I think it's actually good for the league, right? I think it's good for the league to have it actually shows parity, right? Instead of seeing the same old faces, right? Going to the finals year after year, add some exciting excitement, at least for those, especially for those cities, right? For Atlanta specifically, right? I mean, when's the last time Atlanta been there for this far along? So I think it's pretty cool. Phoenix as well, right? Phoenix is another team that you really didn't expect to go this far or to be in the thick of things at this point of the season. So I think that's pretty cool. The Clippers, I mean, the Clippers were kind of right. There was we they were the team that was supposed to be there, so there's not really a lot of not really a lot of surprise there. So it's kind of like, well, more of a feeling of finally, or what took you so long.
Mhm.
And Milwaukee is also a little bit of a surprise, even though it appears as though Giannis has been turned into the heir apparent by in some circles. So I do think that it's great for it's great for their city, right? It's great for Milwaukee. You get to see these guys, you get to see their fans and the excitement in their fans. I was looking at watching the Milwaukee game the other day and looking at how excited their fans are, and being that they're now able to get back into fans are able to get back into the arenas. I mean, it's electric, right? I think it's a combination of that, right? It's a combination of a lot of things. Phoenix's crowd is crazy too. I never took notice of how crazy those guys are and how
Mhm.
loud it is over there. But I think overall, right, it's great for those teams. I think it's refreshing for other teams and other players to get a shot.
Yeah, so one of the things I've heard, and I agree with just about everything you said. Although I thought it was interesting you threw that in, that Giannis is being placed as the heir apparent. Heir apparent to what? Heir apparent to whom? Where were you going with that?
So it's a given that the league is based off of narratives, right? So they're always trying to find the next star, right? Whoever's going to be the next guy. It could very well be the next LeBron James, or the next whoever the next excuse me, not media, whoever the next NBA darling is. I heard, you think it might have been the Bill Simmons podcast, and they were already kind of writing things out, saying, okay, well, if Giannis wins, he's going to be viewed as the best player in the league, right? And it is almost it just always seems as though they're trying to turn him into something he's not. But I get it, right? You've got to sell tickets, right? You've got to put butts in the seats. So um, when I say he's the next face of the league. At least that's where it looks like it's going.
Got it. Well, one, I don't believe Giannis can ever be the face of the league, no matter how good he is or is not, and that's just the factor of a foreign player just can't be the face of the league just based on the American exceptionalism mindset. There's just no way, no matter how good a player is, if he was born overseas, he's just not going to be the face of the league. That it just doesn't work that way. But even with that said, I think that it's more, and you and I have talked offline about this. It's less about trying to make Giannis something he's not, and maybe just trying to show how far he's come from the very raw, literal pogo stick that he was when he got drafted. Looking at, he's not a particularly skilled player, but even with that, his game has come a long way from when he first entered the league, and also looking at his body. So you see a complete transformation as a player since he's come into the league. So they're saying, okay, that makes a good story if and when he can carry a team to a championship, as well as the fact that he stayed in the small market. Could have went done the super team thing, decided not to do that, but etc. I think overall though, this is, to your point, very good for the league. I was wondering, I guess this kind of forced the league's hand in terms of trying to market different teams and market different stars, because we saw, I always point to it, we saw when Michael Jordan retired all those years ago, the huge drop off in interest in the NBA, and they were seemingly headed on that same trajectory with LeBron James pretty much being at the tail end of his career. That you're going to see that similar drop off when he steps away, and I couldn't for the life of me understand why they weren't, I guess, to put it one way, kind of sacrificing a bit of today for tomorrow and for the future, in terms of, okay, we know what LeBron has done. We know what a cash cow he's been for the league. We know he's been the face of the league for quite some time, probably following Kobe. And then, but that when he steps away, there's going to be that drop off. So you market the young stars now so that when he steps away, you can go right into that without having to take a couple of years finding that next person. So I think this is good for the league, even if it's not something the NBA specifically desired to have. Not for the outside of LA, not having that major media market. And realistically, even though it's LA, it's not the Lakers, it's the Clippers, right? But again, that's another good story you can market if that should come to fruition, that the Clippers win the championship. You have if something crazy happens and Atlanta wins the championship, you have Trey Young being another small guard
That's
carrying
that's gonna
the
be a
championship.
story.
That would be
That is gonna
bonkers.
be
Exactly.
it's
And we're
gonna
going to
be a
talk some more
story.
about Trey Young later. Obviously, if Phoenix wins, it's going to be Chris Paul
CP3.
finally getting to the mountaintop, right? Getting what he probably, what most people who love basketball feels he deserves after all this time. And as well, carrying that young team, teaching them how to win. So there's a lot of great storylines left. And I think it is good for the NBA that, we have these Final Four teams and just something different to market, something different to look at. I don't think this is the best thing for the casual fan. You and I both know there's a whole lot of those out there, and they'll have a whole lot to say about these things. We're not going to name any
Shout
names.
out to Torre.
Fair enough, but so we'll see where it goes. But I think either way, I think we've got captivating series on both sides of the bracket, and you're going to have a good finals. I don't think we have any bad series, no matter how it turns out.
So one thing I neglected to say,
Okay.
you are actually seeing coaching, great coaching on display.
Yes.
And to the point you made earlier about the casual fan not understanding what they're looking at and not necessarily appreciating what they're looking at, they won't. This will go completely over their heads when they're watching it. The amount of coaching, especially by Ty Lue, and I'm sure we'll
I
get
was
into
just
it
about
down
to
the
say
road.
Ty Lue. Yeah.
Ty Lue is proving himself to be one of the better coaches that we have seen in a long time. So when I
Mhm.
hear the argument of, well, LeBron never played for any Hall of Fame coaches, well, Ty Lue looks like he's on his way, doesn't he? Uh,
We'll have to see how it plays out, but yeah, this would be really big for him if he can finish the job and win here and with the Clippers. Oh yeah.
he might actually, in my opinion, based on what I've seen so far, in these first 3 rounds, as far as being a tactician is concerned, he
Mhm.
might be up there with the better ones. We'll wait to see what happens, but
Mhm.
that's what it looks like so far.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I and real quick to finish up with that before we move on, I love not necessarily the X and O's of what Ty Lue is doing, but the personnel movements, how he's responding to,
Yep,
reacting to, and dictating matchups in terms of how he uses personnel groupings. That's pretty impressive.
yep, yep.
All right. While we're still here talking about the playoffs, so let's get your take on both of these series. And because I'm an East Coast guy, I've been one for my whole life, and so have you. Let's start in the Eastern Conference with the Hawks and the Bucks. Who will win and why?
It's up in the air. Uh, it's up in the air. I don't know if you. I don't know if I don't know if Milwaukee has the personnel to make any adjustment to contain Trey Young. If Trey Young stays hot, this is going to be a 7-game series. And if it's going to be a close game, if they're going to be close games, Atlanta's going to win. Um, it comes down to it's styles make fights. I call Trey Young the jitterbug, as you know,
Mhm.
right? Um, he's uncontainable, especially with all those big guys. So if Budenholzer doesn't do what Ty Lue is doing and make the proper adjustments, and I don't know what the proper adjustments could be, but I don't think Lopez fits well in that lineup, at least not in this series. Um, I think they could find themselves in a little bit of trouble. It's forget about what the seeding is, and forget about what the history is, and what the past has what we've learned from these guys in the past, from these two particular teams in the past. These young guys don't care. Atlanta, this the funny thing about Atlanta is they got a little bit of braggadociousness to them. They got a little audacity to them, right? They got some nerve. Um, you know, John Collins wearing the a t-shirt of the dunk on Embiid on the night that they eliminated them, right? Clint Capella talking trash. Um, um, Trey Young with his histrionic, shaking his shoulder before the shot and
Mhm.
hitting the
Mhm.
shot, right? you got to know, right? These guys aren't necessarily worried about it, and they have a heck of a coach in Nate McMillan, right? And listen, I don't, by for all intents and purposes, you have not heard, the same kind of praises being laid at Budenholzer's feet, right?
Mhm.
Especially given the job that he's done in the first two rounds, right? So it could get interesting. I don't have a definitive winner, right? I think Milwaukee's best bet is that Trey gets cold and he stops hitting his shot. I don't think they can do anything to impact his game at all.
So
He's not controlled by any in their personnel on that
so
roster.
I'm I'm leaning Milwaukee here. We've talked
Well, we
about it.
know that. We know that.
I'm leaning Milwaukee here, and I have two thoughts kind of on what you said. Number one, okay, if Trey Young's going off, that's fine. Let him go off. He's gonna have to score 60 or 70 then. Control everything else. There's not really a second star on that team. There's other quality role players who can contribute, but there's not a second star on that team. So okay, fine. Trey Young's gonna do his thing, but you gotta lock up everybody else. My second point is I thought it was interesting when you said you're not sure if Lopez is the right fit. Now, I think if I'm Budenholzer, especially with Lopez being like a more perimeter oriented big, that forces Capella out of the paint to try and contest him and guard him. So now you have more lanes, which open up things for Giannis, who we know is at his absolute best going downhill. And with Lopez all the way out by three, it also clears space in that mid post, top of the key area and elbow area for Middleton, who again is a guy that when he's playing well, the Bucks are really really tough to beat. So I guess I'm looking at it like Lopez is not going to be a dominating force, but he holds a purpose offensively that opens things up for other guys, and of course he can make those shots.
Here's the problem: he's unplayable defensively, though, right? So he's unplayable on that drop, on that pick and roll when he falls back to protect the paint.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes unplayable. So a Trey Young coming out of that pick and roll and shooting that floater.
Mm-hmm.
What did he shoot? 50% in that last game,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only is he, and what do you have? 11 assists.
Yes.
And this and you got contributions from everybody in Milwaukee, and Bogdanovich was hurt. This is what I'm saying, right? Looking at the series without having a dog in the fight, looking at the series and saying, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what adjustments you can make, um, because it's not like this guy's tall, right? This guy's like 5'11", right? He's 5'11" and quick and can shoot with range. I don't know how you stop that with that roster, right? So regardless of what Milwaukee does offensively, they have a problem scoring at times. They go through scoring droughts. When that issue happens and the other team is still scoring and doesn't have those issues and believes that they can beat you, it's going to be an interesting series. It's I could easily see in Atlanta going up 3-2. I seriously could see it.
Well, that's my thing is that's fine to an extent, but I'm looking at it and saying again, Trey Young, go ahead, get off. You're gonna have to score a whole lot because, like I said, there that second guy isn't there, and then defensively, the, you were mentioning Lopez when he drops down in the paint on the pick and roll, and Trey Young hitting the floater. All that's great, right? But can we realistically, and we're gonna get to Trey Young a little later, count on Trey Young staying hot? Yes, he's averaged 30 and a half and 10 and a half assists in the playoffs, but he's shooting 42% from the field and 32% from three, right? So yes, he makes shots, timely shots, but I'm not overly concerned about him remaining hot. So he's gonna have
Well,
to do it, and he can't do it by himself because, as we like to say, nobody could do it by themselves.
well, Collins and Herter have been contributors, right? And Bogdanovich, if he can get his legs under him, will be a contributor, as will Dan. Wow, the big Italian dude. What's his name again? Wow,
Oh, geez.
3-point
Gallinari.
shooter. Got get Gallinari, right? They've got some pieces, right? Cam Reddish is coming back. I don't know what you're getting from him. If you're only getting defense, you're fine.
Mm,
They've got some pieces, right? Solomon Jones. They've got some. They have a bunch of little irritants that can make things interesting. And these guys are playing with nothing to lose, right? They've
mhm.
got no expectations. They're already playing with house money, right? They're already further than anybody expected them to be.
Okay, but now you
And
look at
and
yeah,
and they're 8-2 on the road in these playoffs.
good number, good number. But now you look at the flip side of it, and you just mentioned you said Milwaukee at times can have trouble scoring. Last game, even though they lost, you got 36 from Greek Freak, and you got I think 33 from Drew Holiday. Right now, not saying that Drew Holiday is going to consistently repeat that. We know he's not, but if Drew Holiday drops back down to 20 or 22, but you get that 25 from Middleton, you're okay. And just like I said in the previous series, Middleton makes a few more shots. Now you got something different. And we have seen that when Middleton is making shots, Milwaukee is very tough to beat.
And cool, agreed. Bogdanovich wasn't hitting his shots either.
Mm,
So this is the fact that they beat them with Bogdanovich not at full power and not doing. Sorry about that. The the them being able to win despite not getting major contributions from Gallinari and Bogdanovich should also be something that at least worth considering.
all right,
Right?
fair enough.
It's not going to be a walk in the park. This is going to be
No, it's not.
they're gonna Milwaukee's going to have to strap up, and I don't know if they can.
Fair enough. Let's go ahead and switch to the other conference. Right now, we see Phoenix has a 2-1 lead over the Clippers, and we'll talk Paul George later. But what do you see in that series?
I gotta. So I thought Chris Paul coming back was going to be the shot in the arm that the Suns needed to kind of like push these guys along, to kind of say, hey, okay, listen, we're going to put our foot on the gas and get these guys out of here. It doesn't look like that's going to happen, especially now that Cameron Payne's ankle is busted,
Mm-hmm.
and Devin and Booker's nose is broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Chris Paul didn't play for 11 days, so I think he's got a little bit of rust. But the adjustment that I didn't see, and shout out to Rick Bucher, the adjustment
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't see that was impactful was putting Batum on Chris Paul. Chris Paul's not going to blow past anybody these days, and that
Yes.
length, Batum's length is really impacted the way that he played, and it allowed Zubac to match up directly with Ayton. I didn't see that. Listening to Bucher's pod actually pointed that out, and it made a bunch of sense. If this goes 2-2, and we don't know what Kawhi Leonard's situation is,
Mm-hmm.
if this goes 2-2, and Kawhi comes in around game 5 or game 6, the Suns might be in trouble.
Mm. Right. Right.
The Suns might be in some trouble. Great series though, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least so far. Devin Booker's the truth, but Patrick Beverly hasn't really been useful in the last 2 series. He has come alive
Mm-hmm.
at least in the last 2 games,
Yep.
right? This could easily be 2-1, right? Paul George hits those foul shots, and this could easily be 2-1, and we're having a different conversation. So it's Patrick Beverly's doing what he needs to do. Shout out to Reggie Jackson, right? Reggie Jackson and the shots that he's hitting, right? This dude is hitting big shot after big shot to the degree where
Mm-hmm.
we're only expecting him to hit big shots.
Yep.
And again, right? Why I don't play the narrative game, right? And I don't look at the the expecting the name on the jersey to beat somebody or to lose to somebody. At the end of the day, these guys have got to go out here and play, right? These guys are professionals. I've said it to you 100 times. I've probably said it on this podcast a couple of times. Systems make players. Personnel make players. Who I'm playing around, where I get my shots from, my coach's confidence in me, my teammates' confidence in me, all play big determining factors as to how effective I'm going to be on the floor. So
Mm-hmm.
he's comfortable. You can see he's comfortable, and he's not required to carry the load. So he's coming out here, and all he's doing is balling. Right? All he's doing is coming out here and just and letting it go. And look at all the big shots he's hitting. I think them playing as scrappy as they're playing, I think they have a slight, and excuse me, and Paul George just doing all of the yeoman's work. They
Mm-hmm.
have a pretty good chance. They have a pretty good chance of beating Phoenix.
Right.
Better than I thought initially.
Yeah, I'm relatively impressed with what I'm seeing here. In terms of just overall, this series has been close. So a couple things, we haven't really seen Marcus Morris Sr. really get off for the Clippers yet this series either, and that's a guy who can be a legitimate difference maker as a third or maybe even fourth
Hmm.
guy for that team. And but on the flip side, to your point, and we haven't seen Devin Booker really go off yet this series either.
Well, he did
Um,
in the first game. He did in the first
oh yeah,
first two
the
games.
40-point triple double, right?
Yeah, yeah,
To,
yeah.
to open the series, right. Okay. Well, the last two games he hasn't, but with that, I think we have a very good series, very good matchup. I do think I see the Clippers pulling it out, probably 6 or 7 games, and that for me looks like a LA Clippers Milwaukee Bucks final, which should be very interesting. Obviously, we know whether or not Kawhi Leonard returns is going to play a huge role in things. But thus far, Paul George has really stepped it up, and we're going to talk about him in a little bit. But now we're kind of getting away from the teams and the series, and let's talk a little bit about some of these individual players. And how good is Trey Young? I mentioned it earlier. He's averaging 30 and a half points a game and 10 and a half assists a game in these playoffs. Obviously, he has his team in a position where pretty much no one thought the Hawks would be, with an opportunity to go and play for a championship. How good is this guy?
As good as he, unconventional answer here. As good
Mm,
as he thinks he is. Um,
mm, mm,
he is cocky. He believes.
mm,
You can see this is not situational bravado. This is
mm,
not false bravado. He's 100% bought in to what he is as a player,
right.
which to be honest with you is permeating the personality of the team, right? Which is probably what has given them the moxie needed for them to have gotten as far as they have. Um, I think what I underestimated was his playmaking ability. He's a heck of a passer. Um, he has he's got a couple of elements in him from a couple of different players. Of course, there's some Steph Curry with the long shooting, but he's got some Jason Kidd and Steve Nash passing him in him as well.
Mm,
And that kind of makes him a little tough, right? If
hmm
you want to double him, it makes it really difficult to double him because of all of that. He's an uncanny player to say the least, right? And I would venture to say I got to see a couple of more games of this level of performance. But if you ask Doc Rivers and Ben Simmons what kind, how good is he, they'll tell you, right? There's going to be a couple of expletives in there as well,
hmm
but they,
hmm
they will tell you he's damn good, better than advertised.
Yeah, Trey Young to me, he looks like a big shot taker and maker. A lot of issues with shot selection, a lot of issues with the percentage. But like I said, when it seems to be time, he seems to step up and really make big shots. He is a great passer. This is a guy who led the country in assists when he was in college. So, I mean, a lot of people play well in college, but I mean, he did. I think he's the only player ever to lead the nation in scoring and assists in the same season in college. He did that. So, I mean, you saw there was something there. I don't like the 32% from three in the playoffs.
It's the playoffs, man. It's the play. All the
Yeah, but
percentages go down in the
32%
playoffs.
though, that's that's not what you want. But again, he seems to make big shots when it's time. He's a guy who will never stop shooting because to your point, that belief is there. He believes he's gonna make these quality shots. I'm inclined to be concerned about his total lack of defense, but in the modern NBA, that seems to not be an issue. Um, Oddly enough, though, especially at that position, there's a lot of really good offensive players at that position. So not being able to defend would be particularly bothersome for me if I'm a coach. But I guess you live with it given what he gives you, in other parts of the game. So you
And
deal with that.
we're also in the switching era as well. Everybody's switching. Everybody's playing these exotic defenses. So Drew Holiday goes for 33 points the other day and they still lose, right? So that's his matchup and they still lose. Okay. As I said to you offline, who cares if he puts those numbers up, right? At the end of the day, that's not even a concern, right? We'll play token defense on you and let you get off Drew Holiday. Guess what though? You still got to chase me around.
Hmm.
And I got you put up 33 and I put up 48 and I got 11 assists and you lost.
Hmm.
You've got to go back to the drawing board now,
Hmm.
right? Because your strategy didn't work and it's not gonna work. You're almost playing into my hands. And I said that to you. I said that to you prior to the game.
Hmm.
I said, if I am Nate McMillan, Drew Holiday, please do all that scoring. I hope you do all that scoring.
Hmm.
The guy who we really need to control, you controlled for us, which is oh man. Uh why did I just forget the guy's name? The third guy. You just talked about him hitting the shot. The third guy in Milwaukee who didn't have a great game. Middleton, sorry.
Middleton,
Wow.
yeah, okay.
Um yeah, but Middleton, to me, Giannis's points are less important than Middleton's points. Right? Middleton's a pull-up three guy. Middleton is the guy that gets hot and he starts opening up everything else
Hmm.
because he's a consistent perimeter threat. Holiday, you're gonna get is gonna be off and on with him, and Giannis, we know what you're gonna do. So if you can keep Middleton under control, you're probably gonna end up winning the series. Um, so letting a Drew Holiday get his shots off, sure, why not? Go for it. Guess what though? On the other end of the court, you're gonna have to end up guarding. You're gonna have to guard me. So it almost works against you to be putting up that much offensive output. But we'll see. But Budenholzer's kind of taking a beating as far for his coaching this season. Let's see if he continues to take a beating, or at
Hmm.
least continues to feed the machine that's been given him the beating.
Right. Real quick, interesting enough that the last time the Hawks were in the Eastern Conference Finals, Budenholzer was their head coach. Interesting little nugget.
Ah, and how'd that
Mhm.
work out?
Yeah.
Um,
Hey, I just thought it was interesting. So staying in the East, wh- I know you're not a big fan of Giannis as a player. What can he do to improve as a player, regardless of the results of this playoff run?
Switch positions. He's a center. He's not. He's not. He's. I don't have. He's a great athlete.
Yeah.
His situational awareness is challenged, or at least not. It's not at the level where it should be, given the amount of praise that he's gotten, um, despite his improvement. Um, he is he is a mechanical player, and there's not a lot of smoothness to his game, and I don't know if that gets fixed.
Mm.
So you put him at the five permanently. You now and you allow him to use that athleticism differently, where he's a different version of Dwight Howard, right? Um, you're not going to make him into a jump shooter. You're not going to make him into a perimeter player taking guys off the dribble. It's just not going to happen. Um, so because people don't really post players up these days, Um, him working on the block, even though I think it wouldn't matter anyway, but I don't think it'll be effective for him because that's not how the game is played. I think he's a great pick and roll threat, as you can see.
Hmm.
He's a really good rim protector, as you can see. I think you move him to the 5 and you let somebody else play the 4, and he'd be more impactful, or he'd be at least playing in his position. He's already 7 feet tall, so it's not like it's not like he would be playing against guys who are bigger than he is.
Fair enough. I all that makes sense. I don't know if I mean he started was this year 8, year 9 in the league for him now. So it's kind of getting to a point where your game is your game. Although, the great ones have over time consistently added things to their game each summer. So y- you never know what he is or is not able to add. I guess we kind of got to see. Um, Again, I just kind of look at it more along the lines of how far he's come as a player and what's left in terms of how much further he can develop. We'll see. I don't think
So
anyone's ever expecting him to be Kevin Durant, obviously, but it's going to be interesting to see what more he can develop and add to his skill set.
so when you say the great ones added to their games, right?
Hmm.
The great ones had foundation. They had the foundation to build off of. He doesn't really have the foundation to build off of, right? He's simply at this point he's simply a player, right? He's an athlete, great athlete, really plays hard, which is probably his biggest skill, right? Playing hard. Um, but he's not. There's nothing that you can say, wow, he's really really great at doing that. And so therefore, the stuff that you would normally see in terms of improvements, he's behind that curve. So just to me, his improvement is being able to develop basic footwork,
Hmm.
or to be able to finish with both hands. That's development for me, because considering that he didn't have much of that starting off, right? So yeah, it would be nice if he could add some polish to his game, but that's probably not going to happen. It's too far along, and I don't know if he has the natural dexterity or fluidity to be able to play, attain those skills and make them look pretty. I just don't see it.
Maybe it doesn't have to look pretty; it just has to be effective. But we'll see.
If you ever look, like, pay attention to how he shoots a shot, his body's it's almost like two people. It's like two people taking a shot. His lower body's one person's upper body's another person. It's like it's his mechanics are terrible. But hey, listen, he's making $250 million and I'm not. So maybe my
Hey.
mechanics should be worse.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's getting a lot. Okay. Let's go west now. If, as I understand it, I believe Chris Paul's on a 1 year deal in Phoenix. What do you see for his future? Do
is
you
he?
see him going somewhere else? Do you see
Oh, is
Phoenix
he?
extending him?
Oh,
I guess if they win, they probably will.
he's got
Um,
one more year.
I
One more year
believe
left on that
I
deal.
believe he's on 1 year.
So is that at the end of this season it's over, or does he have a player option next year?
That I would have to check. I can
Okay.
check.
I mean, listen, I think win or loss, they're going to keep him, right? The
Mm-hmm.
shot of the arm that he has provided for that organization can't be matched, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is he 35 or 36? How old is
Uh,
he?
he is 36.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whew, um, that's interesting. The I don't know how much you pay him, and I don't know how long the contract will be, because I think he's making somewhere around 40 mil this season. I think.
Yeah, he's making I think 44 this year. Yes.
Wow.
And
Whoa.
he's an unrestricted free agent going into next season. So this is it. Because
Oh wow. Okay.
he's still on the deal from Houston.
Okay.
Hmm.
That's interesting. Um, it depends, right? I think if they win the championship, naturally he stays there.
Hmm.
I don't know if he could be. Depends on how things go. He might end up wearing either, playing out of the Staples Center, right? Depends on, and for either team.
I actually
Um,
thought about the Knicks.
no,
All the money's there, and if he
no,
gets a championship, he's got what he wanted on that front. I
nah,
thought about that. They need it.
no, nah. His family lives in Los Angeles. Um,
They can
he's
move.
made,
He's filthy rich.
yeah,
They could move.
no.
That sounds like a Nets fan talking, but go ahead.
That has nothing to do with the Nets fan. That's the New York. New York is in a rebuilding phase. New York is in a rebuilding phase, and they haven't figured it out. They're still in culture building mode. Um, he doesn't have that much tire left on that on those how much tread left on those tires to be kind of pulling those kinds of stunts, right? I think a ready-made situation works better for him, right? Especially if they don't win. Um, if they don't win, I could see him going to either the Clippers or the Lakers. Um, he doesn't necessarily fit well with the Lakers though. Um, but you never know. I think he's probably a better fit for the Clippers, but I don't know if he and Paul George actually get along.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that would be a factor. I think if I remember it well, those two don't get along with one another. But he could also stay pat, stand pat and stay in Phoenix because of his chemistry with Monty Williams, right?
Hmm.
And the newfound chemistry with the young boys, and running it back, right? Knowing full well that if they didn't, if he didn't get COVID, things probably would be different. So I wouldn't rule it out. Him just standing pat and staying there.
Fair enough. What's going on with Kawhi Leonard? Do we have any idea what's the real extent of his injury? What the injury is? I've been trying to kind of look at that. I haven't. The Clippers, I'm sure by design, aren't putting it out. They want to continue to make Phoenix prepare for the possibility of having to play against Kawhi, but I'm not sure he's going to be back anytime soon. Have you heard or seen anything?
I have been looking as much as I can to try to find what the answer is, and there is none. These guys are holding this close to the vest.
Hmm.
I've heard that it's probably a lot worse than they've let on, but they haven't given any indication one way or the other. I mean, given that he kept playing afterward,
Hmm.
um, after he had heard it, I think I thought that would be, that was an indication that it wasn't as bad. And then here we are where he hasn't played in the first three games. I don't know one way or the other. He was at the game last night, so I don't know if that's an indication of anything.
Hmm. Yeah, I
But
saw he was there with his kids, I think.
yeah, so I think that's up in the air. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
There's no way to know, right? These guys are kind of keeping it close to the vest
Hmm.
and doing a great job at doing that. So
Right.
I don't know.
So here's the next kind of bigger thought of going with Kawhi Leonard. How do we think injuries are going to impact his legacy, especially if the Clippers win the championship this year without him? We've always seen him as the number one guy for the Clippers, that kind of mercenary hired gun. We saw, he went to Toronto, he wins, and he comes to LA, makes him relevant again. How do we see the injuries impacting how he's viewed in the long term?
Depends on who's telling the story, right? It's his heroics that got them out of the first two rounds, right? So for the most part, at least the Dallas series, right?
The
He was
Dallas
having a
series, yeah.
heck of Yeah, he was having a heck of a playoff run until he got hurt. So I don't know if it impacts it at all. But that's me, me, right? I don't necessarily look at all the stories and what have you. Um, I think his heroics allowed Paul George to kind of get his legs under him and get a feel for where he is to be able to deliver the way he has. He's had a pretty solid run as well. So I don't know, right? I think I think if we don't see him by game six, I think it's a wrap. I don't think he's
Mm,
coming back.
mm,
But I think if he comes, I think if he can go and they
mm,
can and Clippers can get The Clippers can get the Suns wrapped up, and he plays in the finals. Then let's say Milwaukee wins, and he he to a large degree shuts down or impacts the way Giannis is playing. I think because he's going to be a nightmare for both Middleton and Giannis, right? If a healthy Kawhi Leonard is going, and the Clippers are going to win that series, I don't even see it going six, at
Wow.
all, at all, at all. Um, they don't have the components. They don't have the components, and they don't for all intents and purposes, they don't have the chutzpah, right? They don't have the cojones. Um, but where we are right now, I don't think it would impact them at all, right? At the end of the day, you got hurt. You got hurt. I don't hold injuries against players. Because every time you get out there, you can hurt yourself, right? It just is. Um, if they win without them, he was a bad man before he got hurt. He's a bad man after when he heals up. That doesn't change anything.
Hmm.
He's just got a ring that he coasted for versus being the head honcho.
Okay. Speaking of legacies, has Paul George started to change his kind of reputation and legacy? Obviously, legacy lends more towards getting to the end of your career and after you're done. But his reputation, for instance, going kind of from pandemic P to playoff P. What do we think about Paul George and how he's being seen now?
Again, it's so much of this is narrative based. PG is
That's always going to
is
be a part of sports, though. Narratives are
yeah, I
there's
guess.
no way around that.
Some of them are silly though. Um, Paul George is so he's not a primary player. He's a 1A. He's a 1B, right? 1B slash a 1B/2 in terms of a pecking order. He's an immensely talented player, but sometimes his decision making sucks,
Mhm.
and he does a little bit too much chirping before games, after games, that don't lend that and that he doesn't necessarily back up. But that all being said, Paul George is a problem. Paul George is a really, really, really good player, right?
Mhm.
Borderline great player.
Mhm.
And if you watch basketball simply for the basketball and don't care about the stories, your thoughts never really wavered about him. Mine never did. It's like, okay, this dude needs it. A lot of times I'm like, would you just calm down when I look at him? Like, that was such a dumb shot. Why'd you take that shot? So a lot of times it's just his decision making. He can be a little bit erratic at times. But as far as a player is concerned, he's a heck of a defender. He's a heck of a rebounder. He's a playmaker. He's a scorer. It's like, okay, I don't know what else I want in a player, right? Sometimes he hasn't stepped up to the moment, but it happens to a lot of them, right? Not
Mhm.
everybody does, right? Not everybody has that in their game, but he's done it enough, right? Like he hit a half court shot yesterday at halftime, right? Kind of thwarting what looked like it could have been
Mhm.
momentum going towards Phoenix,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of times it's not the shots you hit, it's when you hit the shots you hit, right? So
Mhm.
I know this is only changing the legacy for people who had agendas and who people who had agendas and people who wanted to believe what the narratives were that were created. I just never saw it that way.
Well, is it so much narrative when for a while, pretty much since he was in Indiana as the lead dog, Paul George really, for the most part, hasn't been showing up in the playoffs? Is that narrative or is that just speaking to the facts as they present themselves? Yeah, it makes
So
it a juicy story, especially when you nickname yourself Playoff P and then you don't live up to it. I get that, but he was not living up to, his capability as a player and what
did
we had
he
seen from him in the past.
did he fizzle when he was in OKC, or did he just get a big shot hit on him?
No, in the playoffs, he didn't play well. He didn't play particularly well.
He didn't play well. Or, I
I
don't
don't I
remember
don't
what his
believe so.
numbers were.
I
Okay,
don't remember the numbers either. I don't believe he played well in the playoffs, and it's been a few years.
I think he had a problem. I think he had a problem in it in I think the knock started last year in the bubble, and then he kind of came out and said something about his mental illnesses and
Hmm.
whatever challenge he was having, and they kind of played off of that. Where, in my opinion, he just should have shut up because he's making excuses. But Paul Pierce has been,
Paul George.
sorry, Paul George has been, in my opinion, consistent in
Hmm.
the playoffs. Right? I don't have. Everybody has these templates of what they expect players to be. Not everybody's going to be that, right? Um, he's not. I don't necessarily think that he's a franchise cornerstone. I think he should be matched up with. He should be riding alongside the franchise cornerstone. He's a great complement to whoever the star player is. He'll play his part. He can do different things. So my expectations for him aren't necessarily what everybody else thinks and what everybody else is. Everybody expects everybody to be a franchise player. It's simply impossible. It's not gonna. It's not gonna work.
Well, the issue is, I think when you got a guy of a certain talent level, you expect that he can be that. And again, especially seeing that he was that guy in Indiana. So you're saying, okay,
But
well,
what
he
did they?
should
But
be
what
able
did
to,
they win
because
in
he was
Indiana?
young then. Well,
No, but what
they
did?
went, they went to the conference finals, and
So
realistically, that team kind of played as well as it could play, but then it runs up against the Heatles, right? Which is the super team, obviously. That.
so at the end of the day, right?
Mm.
It's there. Your circumstances are your circumstances, right? So there are a lot of talented. I would venture to say Zach Levine, to a degree, is probably more talented than he is, right? Just in terms of physical capabilities, right? Zach Levine's probably even longer and jumps higher and what have you, right? Um, but what are the expectations from him, right? Very few. Um, I think some of the guys haven't figured out just to be quiet and just play your game, like a Donovan Mitchell, right? Donovan Mitchell doesn't really talk a whole lot about, calling himself, playoff D and what have you. Like he just comes out there and plays ball. Um, and some guys like Paul George feel the need to kind of speak their minds and don't really recognize what the impact will be of those statements should things not go as planned.
Mhm.
So again, nothing he's doing is surprising me. And
Mhm.
when he falls apart, I'm not like, oh, I can't believe it, because I've watched him enough to know he's erratic. Yeah, he makes some terrible ball. He makes some terrible decisions at times. He takes some terrible shots. Sometimes not situationally aware. Nothing new, right? It's nothing new. It's like I've seen this before. I've watched enough of this to know. Yeah, this is what Paul George is, right? So you just hope that you hope you get more positives than negatives, and typically that's what happens.
Okay. All right. Last on the player front, what are we gonna do about Ben Simmons? This is a guy who
Oh,
has a lot of talent. I personally, just looking at him, I think it's all between the ears. I just don't believe he wants it. Now, I'm not expecting everyone to be a Kobe or a Bird or an Isaiah or a Mike or what have you, one of those guys who just wants it more than the opposition. Everybody's not built that way. I get it. But for a guy with that skill set, who's a max player, who you do expect more out of him. And then to see that he just really doesn't seem to care at all, and his game just doesn't seem to have expanded since he came into the league. You're wondering, does he have what it takes to get better? Does he have the interest? Does he have the dedication? And even still, is he gonna remain in Philly?
so the key parts of the question that I'm going to lock in on are the dedication and the interest, and apparently that's going to be a resounding no.
Mm-hmm.
He's added nothing to his game,
Mm-hmm.
um, for whatever the reason, and I think it took this kind of situation, this level of embarrassment, and this level of you know public scrutiny
Mm-hmm.
for him to see where the problem was. There's stories about him not wanting to work on his game. I was actually what I think I'd heard this a couple of years back, um, from a coach. I was watching something, and one of his coaches while he was at LSU telling him, "Hey, you should really learn how to shoot." And he says, "I don't need to." He says, "Well, you can't play basketball without learning how to shoot." And he pushed back, right? So as evidenced by his inability to shoot shots,
Mhm.
he never really viewed that as something as important, which speaks to a mindset, right? Where you're not only are you lackadaisical about the trajectory of your career and what you can be, you're not even worried about, you're not even worried about the impact that you're making or not making by not having this particular skill set.
Mhm.
Or even worse, you're delusional about what your capabilities are as a result of not having this particular skill set, right?
Mhm.
um, none of which is a good outcome, right? We can agree. So I think he was more kind of leaning on his talent, and now he got a rude awakening. Now, how he responds to that is going to tell you where things are going to be, because I'd always said if he had a mid-range jump shot, Philly would be a problem, because
Mhm.
now he can operate from the mid post, passing and shooting, right? And now it creates openings for Embiid. It creates openings for Harris and their shooters Curry and Korkmaz, right? But not being a threat, 16, 20 feet out, and you have the ball in your hand that
Mhm.
much,
Mhm.
it's essentially cognitive dissonance, right? It's one thing doesn't make any sense, and you got to make an adjustment. I think Nate McMillan knew what that was, knew how to key in on that, knew what to take away from him, and at that point, he basically became shell shocked, right? And this is the results, right? Poor planning prevents no with
Prior
all the
planning
P's,
prevents poor performance. Yeah.
my man. So I think we will see how he bounces back. Is he going to
Mhm.
stay in Philly? Depends. I don't know. I don't think he can. The Philly crowd's a pretty rough bunch.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I don't think. I don't know if he can, but if he comes back and he's knocking down threes and he's knocking down mid-range pull-ups, that yeah, sorry about that. That could change things. We will see.
All right. Finally, briefly, let's touch on these coaching hires. Three big ones recently. You got Ime Udoka in Boston. You got Rick Carlisle to the Pacers. Clearly, Larry Bird had something to do with that one. I'm not saying that he's not an outstanding coach. He's a champion. I'm sure there was interesting interest in him from multiple teams, but at the end of the day, he and Bird are pretty tight. And Jason Kidd finalizing a deal in Dallas. Let talk to me about those three. How you think they are going to affect the teams that they've gone to?
Um, Boston needed a young voice with some credibility. From my understanding, Ime Udoka had had established quite a bit of credibility on those Team USA
Hmm.
in those practices in those games. And Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were big proponents and big reasons why he got hired. I haven't seen him coach a game yet. I know he's a good defensive coach. I haven't seen him coach a game yet. But if he's a stat, it appears as though he was pretty close to getting a job, a couple of times. So it's almost like it's just kind of like his turn. I'm anxious to see what that team looks like now that he'll be running it. We will see. But good for him. Good for him. I think if he's kept anything from Pop and from Nash slash D'Antoni,
Hmm.
I think he'll be fine. Right. I think he'll be fine. Now these guys are the ones that asked him to come to. They essentially endorsed him, so he is. They will play for him at least. Until they have a reason not to. They've also got some roster changes to make as well, but I think he'll
Hmm.
be fine. He'll be fine. At least in the short term.
All right, Rick Carlisle in Indiana with the Pacers.
A natural fit. Rick Carlisle needed to get out of there. Needed to change the scenery. He wasn't going to keep. I think he had lost credibility in the eyes of
Luke,
not
Luka.
only Luca, right? The organization, right? So he had looked
Mm,
so Luca had a larger say than he is, I guess, of course, because he's holding the franchise hostage with re-signing. So he was going to be a lame duck going into the season with 1 year left anyway. So he figured, hey, let me get out of here, right?
mhm.
Might as well, of course, knowing I'm sure he knew that the Indiana position would be available. I also think those players need somebody with his kind of gravitas and his kind of heavy hand to kind of get those guys, playing the way that they should be or could be, given their potential. Right, he's a nice piece for those guys to kind of move them, from where they are into the next step, and the next step is likely second, third round of the Eastern Conference.
Okay. And finally, Jason Kidd with the Mavericks, where he won his lone championship.
Great fit. That's where they drafted him. Nice story there, right? So
That too,
full
right?
circle.
Mm-hmm.
But also a transcendent point guard who can
Mm-hmm.
share some of that insight and experience and was insight, wisdom, and experience with Luca, right? Who, although a good passer, is not even close to what J Kidd is. So yeah, I think it's an excellent hire. Good for him. He's getting another shot. He hasn't been blackballed out of the league. I think depending on what kind of roster moves they're going to make, because what do you call that? Dallas has had some problems with recruiting free agents.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
this might change some things,
Yeah, we
right?
talked about that before we kind of got online here and started recording. Why don't you share a little bit of that? Nike, a former Nike exec, can't remember his name, is kind of coming along with
Nico Harrison,
Nico
Kobe guy.
Harrison. Thank you. Yes, he's coming along with Jason Kidd, and he's going to be working a major role in the Mavericks front office. Tell me how you think the two of them kind of affects things there in Dallas.
You're going to see a bunch of Nike athletes show up. I'll tell you that.
Right.
So not only that, right? Mike Finley, who is also
Mm-hmm.
a Dallas alum, but also a Jordan guy, right? Also
Mm-hmm.
connected with Nico Harrison, along with Dirk Nowitzki, who endorsed those hires, and
Mm-hmm.
there's also a Nike guy. Are going to aid, or they're going to be the face of the new front office, right? Out with Donnie Nelson, right, and in with these guys who will be, for the most part, using leveraging their relationships in order to be able to bring players in.
Mm-hmm.
So, to my understanding, it was a package deal. Harrison and Harrison
Jason Kidd.
and Jason Kidd were a package
Mm-hmm.
deal.
Right.
So it'll be interesting. I think you're going to see a more up tempo offense. I think you'll see the ball getting out of his hands a lot quicker. Not so much dominating the ball, at least in the half court. Um, it's gonna be interesting, right? I think if if Porzingis stays, I think Porzingis will be utilized a whole lot better as well. But it's gonna be interesting. Jason Kidd knows his stuff.
Fair enough. And we will leave it at that. Andy, thanks for joining us again, talking hoops like we always do. You and I, we do this just about every day. So this was just our opportunity to share it with the people out there. So thanks for stopping by, man.
Having so much fun, we would do this for free.
You got it. All right, you
All
take
right,
it
bro.
easy, bro.